tourists on vacation come close to one of the world's worst possible disasters. They board the largest passenger plane of its time, not knowing what's about to occur. The flight crew was also completely unaware of the terrible events that would happen to them. The story of Olympic Airlines Flight 411, in which the lives of 418 people on board and hundreds of civilians on the ground hang by a thread, is based on official accident reports and eyewitness accounts. On August 9, 1978, Hellinikon Airport in Athens, the capital and largest city of Greece. This plane that belongs to Olympic Airlines, the flag carrier of Greece at the time, was being prepared for passenger flight to New York JFK Airport. According to the plan, the double-decker Boeing 747 planned to take off from Athens at 2 p.m. in the heat of noon. Boeing 747-200 was one of the most advanced aircraft with 4 engines and very advanced technology at that time. The first series of the Boeing 747 is the Boeing 747-100. This 747-200 is the next model and is equipped with more powerful engines. It has more passenger capacity and longer range compared to the first series. Because it is equipped with more powerful engines, its maximum takeoff weight is also higher compared to the previous model. It is equipped with 4 Pratt & Whitney JT9D model engines with high bypass. One of the key technologies that makes it possible for a large aircraft like the 747 to take off is the high bypass turbofan engine. In the late 1960s, Pratt & Whitney created a new engine called JT9D and chose it to power the 747. With the help of water injection, this engine provides more thrust for the big jumbo jet. However, the development of the JT9D engine was rushed, leading to some flaws. This engine has various mechanical problems and needs proper upkeep to ensure its safety. For example, the high-pressure turbine core fan blades can get damaged and should be replaced every 500 hours. Additionally, the JT9D engine is sensitive to tailwind conditions during startup. But besides the positive sides, since the engine was newly produced, it was not sure what problems it would cause in the long term. In fact, just 2 years ago, another Boeing 747 belonging to American Airlines caught fire 16 seconds after takeoff, after the turbine blades on the number 1 engine disintegrated. In 1971, after investigating the cause of this incident in the past, the National Transportation Safety Board stated that the fault was due to overheating of the engine during startup procedures. In the cockpit, Captain Pilot Sifis Megatis, who has been working for Olympic Airlines for 32 years, is sitting in the captain pilot seat. In the right seat is pilot Kostas Fikardos, who is also highly skilled and has as much experience as the captain. Pilot Kostas is also a close friend of the captain pilot. Almost all of the passengers who boarded the plane are citizens who came to Greece for vacation from the USA. 418 people boarded the plane, including exactly 400 passengers and 18 flight crew. Let's take a quick break. We've put a lot of effort into this video, so if you find it informative, please remember to subscribe and like. Your support allows us to create more content for you. Minutes before takeoff, the plane began pushback. With 160 tons of fuel on board, the giant Boeing 747 began taxiing. In addition to the empty weight of the plane, the fuel taken on board had reached 350 tons with passengers and luggage. These 4 engines are designed to carry 350 tons of aircraft. You may be wondering why so much fuel was taken on board? The answer is simple. Since the plane was going to make a transoceanic journey and had many engines, 160 tons of fuel was needed for the giant jumbo jet. The maximum takeoff weight of the plane is 353 tons. So they are almost at their limit with a total weight of 350 tons. Olympic Airways had bought this plane specifically for transatlantic flights from New York to Athens. They had added their first 747 to the fleet in 1973. The Greeks were trying to attract a high number of American tourists to their country by reducing the cost per seat due to the high passenger capacity of the plane. The pilots completed taxi and arrived at the runway. They received clearance to take off. One of the most critical points for the incident. Athens is a city surrounded by mountains. Aigaleo Mountain to the west, Parnata Mountain to the north, and Pentelicus Mountain to the east. Because the area is surrounded by mountains, the weather conditions are quite variable during the day and night, as well as changes in altitude. Simply because of its topography, Athens is characterized by meteorological conditions that are not easily understood. Seconds before they were due to power up the engines, the controller gave the weather report. The controller said the atmospheric pressure is 29.83 inches of mercury, lower than standard, and the wind is 12 knots at 310 degrees. The air temperature temperature is 32 degrees with a headwind of about 10 knots. Having a headwind means they would climb more easily. The pilots power up the plane's engines and start the takeoff run. The 350-ton jet begins to accelerate down the runway. It would take longer than usual to reach takeoff speed, as they would be taking off at almost maximum weight. Shortly before takeoff, engine 3 suddenly blew out. At the time of the engine failure, the plane had passed the decision speed of V1. This means that the pilots were prohibited from aborting the takeoff at that moment. They reached takeoff speed within seconds, and they cut the wheels off the runway. You might be wondering why they didn't abort the takeoff during the takeoff run. It was possible that if they tried to stop the plane, which weighed tons, when they reached enough speed, the plane would not be able to slow down and would run off the runway. Therefore, as a result of the engineering calculations made, pilots are forbidden to abort takeoff after exceeding V1 speed. With the remaining 3 engines, they barely accelerated almost to the end of the runway and cut the wheels off the ground. Water flow warning heard in the cockpit immediately after takeoff. Simply, the engines are more easily cooled by water vapor injection during the takeoff and climb phase. Engines that warm up late could generate more power. The pilots perceived this warning as running out of water and turned off the pumps supplying water. The shutdown of the pumps is one of the critical factors limiting the aircraft's ability to climb. Now we come to the most crucial point of the incident. The captain pilot immediately retracted the landing gear as soon as the airplane left the ground, while the airplane is still at 35 feet. This action is completely contrary to the procedures in the flight manual. The reason is that the opening and closing of the doors during the collection of the landing gear caused a temporary increase in the frictional force. The captain took this action because even if there is a short-term increase in frictional force, there would be less friction in the long term after the landing gear is retracted. But based on his 32 years of experience and instincts, he gave the order to retract the landing gear without hesitation. The plane is already trying to climb at very low speeds. It is very risky for the plane to slow down any further. But the captain had already made this vital decision and risked the plane trying to hold on at low speeds for a short time. After 1 mile, they would encounter a hill. The captain thought the only way to overcome the hill was to retract the landing gear. The cabin crew communicated with the pilots via interphone and reported that there is an explosion in the number 3 engine. The controller at the airport said that pieces of the aircraft engine are scattered on the runway. It is the worst thing that could happen to them. The plane was losing altitude and speed. They were very close to the city. It is only a matter of time before the plane lost more speed and stalled, crashing in this densely populated area of Athens. With almost 160 tons of fuel in the plane, they are only 200 feet, about 60 meters above the city. The captain had to keep the plane as straight as he could. Based on the lift formula, when airplanes turn to the right or left, the wing's surface area decreases, and indirectly the lift force generated decreases. At low speeds and altitude, the most important thing this airplane needed is lift. The captain pilot therefore have no chance to turn left or right and have to keep the airplane straight. The captain pilot is slowly losing hope at this time. The captain intended to take the plane to a less densely populated mountainous area to minimize the loss of life. In the meantime, the plane is able to climb a little more, up to 210 feet, about 64 meters. Soon afterwards, as they are still passing over the densely populated area, the captain give the altitude again. In the flight manual of the Boeing 747, the minimum permitted speed of the aircraft at that weight is 156 knots. This plane is currently flying at 160 knots at an altitude of 180 feet. It is only a matter of time before they stalled and crashed. Besides the 400 passengers on board, perhaps the greatest danger is to the unaware civilians in the 100,000-person settlement below them. At this stage, the plane had reportedly descends so low that it is passing over the television antennas on the roofs of some buildings. It is even hitting some of them. They had also passed close to the tallest building in Athens, a 103-meter-high structure. Their speed decreased considerably. The captain pilot, who have no option, tried to increase the speed by descending even lower, even though they are low. The captain was trying to fly the plane by taking risks again. He moved the nose of the plane down, and they increased speed. And the passengers in the cabin are sitting in their seats, completely unaware of what the pilots are experiencing. Some passengers are even taking pictures of the city from their windows, thinking that this low flight is a tour of the city. For about 2 minutes they continued to increase speed, flying straight and steady at low altitude. As soon as they crossed the crowded settlement, the air temperature decreased. The decrease in air temperature means better performance of the engines, and within minutes the plane starts to climb slowly, and they are able to climb up to 1,500 feet by lifting the nose of the plane. They immediately plan to head out to sea to land back at the airport. There is a 1,539 feet mountain waiting for them. If the pilots try to make a turn, they would lose speed or altitude, so the mountain is a great risk. But the crew are very lucky that day. The weather conditions are on the side of the pilots. The wind is coming from the head. The headwind helped the pilots to climb in a short time. The pilots head towards the sea to get rid of the weight they are carrying. As soon as they reach the sea, they start to dump fuel. Fuel dumping is necessary for them to land at the required landing weight. They align with the runway by opening the landing gear again and successfully land with their remaining engines under visual conditions. The crew managed the incident almost perfectly, even if not in accordance with the procedures. Fortunately, no lives are lost in this incident, which is risky enough to lose thousands of lives. As a result of the investigations carried out after the incident, the Boeing announced that there is no problem with the engines. They said that the plane could climb with the remaining 3 engines. They state that the problem is that the thrust in the engines is reduced as a result of the pilots accidentally turning off the water injection pumps immediately after takeoff. This system is very crucial for cooling the engines. When the system is shut down, they stated that the thrust in the engines is reduced during takeoff and climbing. In short, Boeing authorities put the blame entirely on the pilots. The pilot mentioned engine failure and loss of power in the engines, but Boeing did not mention these problems in its report. Although they ignored the real problem, it was reported in the news that the number 3 engine of the plane exploded during the takeoff run. The situation was clearly reflected in the media. It was reported in the newspapers that the turbine cooling pipes used to cool the turbines in the number 3 engine overheated and caused the explosion. The captain pilot's extraordinary effort also took its place in history among the unforgettable achievements. It was a great achievement for the captain pilot to keep the airplane at low altitudes at low speeds. It also required great composure. A split-second mistake could have cost the lives of hundreds of people. The incident was simulated many times in simulators. In all of Boeing's simulations, the incident resulted in an accident, because in the simulation, it did not seem possible for an airplane of that weight to fly at 158 knots. After the incident was simulated, the success of the flight crew was proven once again.